Now that we've finished up the Sermon on the Mount, I've decided where we're going to go. But before I get there, I just want to just recap, just real quick, on the Sermon on the Mount. We learned that God wants us to live a certain way, and that when we live the way He wants us to live, He wants to take care of us. He will provide everything we need. And then as we grow in a relationship with Him, we realize that He has taken care of us all along, and that He will continue to take care of us until the day we die and we go back to Him. So, with that, what I decided to do was I want to go back to the Old Testament. I want to go back to almost the beginning. I want to go back to Genesis. I want to read probably my favorite story in the Bible. This is the story of Joseph. And when I was a kid, my parents got me the book on Joseph. I don't know, maybe I was in kindergarten, first or second grade, whatever it was. And I read the story and I loved it. And it's been my favorite story. And I go back to it often to reread it. So, what we're going to do is we're going to see about this man or this kid and then a man named Joseph. Now, Joseph was the son of Jacob. Now, just to give you a quick little history lesson, back in the beginning of Israel's time, they were brought out by a man named Abraham. Abraham is the father of Israel. Abraham had a son, and his name was Isaac, one of his sons. And Isaac had a son named Jacob. And Jacob was also, his name was also Israel. So that's where they got the name from. Now, Jacob is the lineage that becomes the nation of Israel and where we see Jesus come from. And this happened about 16 or 1700 years before the birth of Christ. So we're looking at probably 35 to 36, 3700 years ago is when this happened. Now, Jacob had 12 sons, and his 12 sons are what we refer to as the 12 tribes of Israel. And when we get back into the New Testament and we get further along, we'll be talking about that and I'll explain it in further detail. So for now, we're just going to look at the story of Joseph and we're going to remember that he is Jacob's son. And I believe, yeah, he's the youngest son. He was the youngest son and he was about 17 years old at the time. Now, what I want you to do, and this is really important, I want you to keep in mind this verse. This is Romans 8:28. It says, "And we know that God causes all things to work together for the good to those that love him and are called according to his purpose." And what that means is that when you become a child of God, he takes everything that happens into your life, whether it's good or bad, and he makes it all work out to the good. He makes it work out to be the person he wants you to be. So we're going to see that in this story. We're going to see a story of evil intentions. We're going to see a story of God's provision, God's foresight, and ultimately God's redemption. So let's get into this. This is Genesis chapter 37. I'm going to read the whole chapter, and I want you to enjoy the story. It goes for about 13 chapters, so I don't know how long it's going to take, and it takes however long it takes. So here we go. Enjoy this story because I love this story. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, in the land of Canaan. These are the family records of Jacob. At 17 years of age, Joseph tended sheep with his brothers. The young man was working with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought a bad report about them to their father. In other words, he ratted on them. Now Israel, who was also Jacob, loved Joseph more than all of his other sons because Joseph was born to him in his old age. He made a robe of many colors for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not bring themselves to speak peaceably to him. Then Joseph had a dream. When he told his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, listen to this dream I had. There we were, binding sheaves of grain in the field. Suddenly my sheaf stood up, and your sheaves gathered around, and it bowed down to my sheaf. Are you really going to reign over us? His brothers asked him. Are you really going to rule over us? So they hated him even more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream and told it to his brothers. Look, he said, I had another dream. And this time the sun, moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. He told his father and brothers, but his father rebuked him. What kind of dream is it that you've had? He said, are your mother and brothers and I going to come down to bow to you in the ground before you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. His brothers had gone to pasture with their father's flocks at Shechem. Israel said to Joseph, your brothers, are pasturing the flocks at Shechem. Flocks at Shechem. Get ready. I'm sending you to them. I'm ready, Joseph replied. Then Israel said to him, go and see how your brothers and the flocks are doing, and bring word back to me. So he sent him to the valley of Hebron and went to Shechem. A man found him there, wandering in the field, and asked him, what are you looking for? I'm looking for my brothers, Joseph said. Can you tell me where they were pasturing their flocks? They moved on from here, the man said. I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. So Joseph set out after his brothers and found them in Dothan. They saw him in the distance, and before he had reached them, they plotted to kill him. They said to one another, here comes that dreamer. Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of the pits. We can say that a vicious animal ate him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. When Reuben heard this, he tried to save him from them. He said, let's not take his life. Reuben also said to him, don't shed blood. Throw him into this pit in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him, intending to rescue him from their hands and return him to his father. When Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped off his robe of many colors that he had on. Then he took them and threw them into the pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat a meal. They looked up, and there was a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were carrying aromatic gum, balsam, and resin, going down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, what do we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay a hand on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And they agreed. When the Midianite traders passed by, his brothers pulled Joseph out of the pit and sold him for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, the boy is gone. What am I going to do? So they took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a young goat, and dipped the robe in its blood. They sent the robe of many colors to his father and said, we found this, examine it. Is this not your son's robe? His father recognized it. It is my son's robe, he said. A vicious animal has devoured him. Joseph has been torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth around his waist, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. No, he said, I will not go down to Sheol to my son I will go down to Sheol to my son mourning. And his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph to Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guard. So what we have here is Joseph bragging to his brothers about dreams that he had. And they were probably dreams put in his head by God. And he went and told his brothers and his father about them. And they scoffed at him. They said, what are you going to do, rule over us? Keep that in mind as we read the story. Then his brothers hated him. They plotted to kill him. But they knew they couldn't do that. So they had a story told. They faked his death. They showed their father, his robes, and made his father believe that he was dead. They made the family believe he was dead. So everybody in this family conspired to lie to the father. It wasn't good. Next week, we're going to pick up more of the story, and we're going to see how this unfolds. But remember, keep this in mind. God's provision, God's foresight, God's redemption. He causes all things to work together for the good to those that love him and are called according to his purposes. That's the running theme for the whole story.